The email subject line read, Notice of line modification. Evelyn Hart blinked, her reading glasses slipping slightly down her nose. She sat in her quiet Phoenix apartment, a warm cup of chamomile tea untouched by her side. The message came from a mortgage management portal she hadn't logged into in months, because the lien, after all, was hers. She opened the document. Request to remove lien filed by Eric Hart. Justification. Claim of verbal loan forgiveness. Her hands trembled. Her son had just filed to erase her legal protection over the $80,000 she had loaned him 6 months ago, without telling her, without even calling. Evelyn's throat tightened. The chamomile tasted like ash now. It had started with a phone call that felt like déjà vu. Eric's voice was cracking, just like when he was 10 and fell off his bike. But this time it wasn't a scraped knee. It was missed mortgage payments, school fees, and Rebecca, his wife, supposedly out of a job. We're drowning, Mom, he had said, his voice rough. We're going to lose the house. Lily's finally settled in art school. Ben just made the travel soccer team. We can't move again. Not now. Evelyn had listened from her retirement community's sunroom, watching sunlight flicker across the quiet garden. She'd been playing bridge with her neighbors, sipping sparkling water, the kind of peaceful life she thought she had earned after decades of working in finance and raising a child alone. I don't like asking, Mom. I really don't, Eric had said. You're not asking for yourself, Evelyn had replied softly. You're asking for your children. I understand. Within days, she'd cashed out a chunk of her late husband's life insurance fund. $80,000 wired directly to Eric's account. Not as a gift. She may have been generous, but she wasn't foolish. Her lawyer, Linda Chen, had drawn up a standard lien agreement. The terms were clear. Repayment within 2 years, or Evelyn retained rights over the house. Eric had paused when she handed him the paperwork. Is this really necessary, Mom? Sweetheart, she'd said, steady as ever. It's not about trust. It's about clarity. You'll thank me later. He'd signed. At first, it felt like a small, worthy sacrifice. Evelyn got weekly updates, texts with the kids' pictures, calls from Rebecca saying thank you. They even sent a watercolor Lily made in class. Evelyn framed it in her dining room. But slowly, the updates grew scarce. The calls shorter. I'm swamped, Mom, Eric would say. We'll catch up soon. Rebecca never picked up anymore. And when Evelyn asked to visit for Ben's birthday, the answer was awkward silence, followed by a mumbled, It's just not the right time. Evelyn chalked it up to stress. But doubt crept in like water under a door. Then came the Facebook post. A friend from her old bridge group shared a photo. A backyard dinner party, long table, Edison lights strung across trees, wine glasses full, laughter all around. The host tagged, Rebecca Hart. Evelyn zoomed in. There was Rebecca, toasting with a gold-rimmed glass. Eric beside her, wearing a sleek new blazer. Behind them stood Lily and Ben, beaming. No sign of struggle. No sign of hardship. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. The next morning, she booked a flight to Denver. She didn't call ahead, didn't warn them. If they were too busy to return her calls, they wouldn't have time to spin excuses. The house looked pristine. Fresh landscaping, a new silver SUV in the driveway. The front door opened after several knocks. Eric's expression turned from confusion to forced cheer in an instant. Mom? What a surprise. I was in town. Thought I'd visit the kids. He hesitated. They're at birthday parties. Both? Different ones. Rebecca stepped into the foyer, barefoot, wearing a designer robe. Her smile was as crisp as her perfume. Evelyn, we didn't know you were coming. I know, Evelyn said, but family's always welcome, right? They let her in awkwardly. The kitchen counters sparkled. There was champagne chilling in a bucket. Dinner party tonight? Evelyn asked, her voice casual but sharp. Just a few friends, Rebecca said too quickly. She stayed for an hour. Every attempt to ask about the kids was met with deflections. When she offered to come back the next day, they claimed back-to-back obligations. Evelyn excused herself politely. She left, but not before spotting a crumpled invoice in the trash for a BMW lease deposit. dated 3 weeks after the loan was wired. And now she stared at her inbox, where Eric had just tried to remove her lien, essentially erasing the only legal proof that the $80,000 wasn't a gift. Evelyn called her lawyer immediately. "Can he do this without my consent?" Linda's voice was calm. "He tried, but the request will be rejected unless you approve it. The document needs your signature." "Then he's trying to manipulate the system." "Yes," Linda said, "but he didn't succeed. You still hold the lien." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, fury creeping into her throat like bile. She thought of Lily and Ben, of the coloring book she'd bought and never got to give them, of the cookies she'd mailed for Easter that were never acknowledged. She called Eric. He didn't pick up. She texted, "We need to talk about your attempt to remove the lien." Read. No reply. That night, Evelyn couldn't stop replaying the day she signed the loan agreement. The relief in Eric's eyes, the hug he gave her, the whispered thank you. A performance. She now saw it clearly, not a son in crisis, but a man who knew his mother's empathy was a lever. And now he was pulling every string to rewrite the narrative, quietly, legally, without consequence. But he'd made one miscalculation. He thought Evelyn was a fragile old woman who'd fade into silence. She opened her email, drafted a message to Linda. Subject: Initiate full review of loan enforcement options. If you've ever been dismissed or ignored after giving your all, type 1. Because Evelyn had been overlooked, and that was about to change. The SUV door slammed shut. Evelyn Hart stood frozen on the gravel, her sneakers barely touching the ground before the tires kicked up a cloud of dust. The vehicle peeled away from the gas station lot with a mechanical purr, clean, efficient, heartless. She blinked against the late afternoon glare, barely catching a glimpse of her grandson Ben's confused face through the rear window as it vanished down Route 285. No phone, no purse, no jacket, only the flimsy sweater she'd tied around her waist and the half-empty water bottle they'd handed her minutes before. A lump formed in her throat, not from heat, not from age, from betrayal. It was supposed to be a healing weekend. Eric had called her out of the blue 2 days ago, sounding contrite, even warm. "Mom, let's start over," he'd said. "You're right. We haven't been fair to you. Why don't you come with us to Colorado Springs? The kids would love to have their grandma on the trip." Evelyn had hesitated, but when Lily chimed in from the background, "Are you really coming, Grandma?" something inside her cracked. She said yes. They picked her up early Saturday morning. Rebecca smiled like nothing had ever gone wrong. The car was packed with snacks, games, a cooler of drinks. Lily and Ben chattered in the back seat. For a moment, Evelyn allowed herself to believe it was real, that maybe the past few months had just been a rough patch. But 4 hours in, everything changed. It started with a detour. "We just need to stop at this station for gas," Eric had said. The exit ramp curved away from the highway into a remote desert stretch with only a dusty convenience store, a couple of faded vending machines, and one broken air pump gasping into the wind. "I'll get you a drink, Mom," Rebecca offered. "Thanks, dear. I'll stretch my legs." She stepped out of the car, looked up at the sun, harsh, merciless. The desert always made her feel small. When she returned to the pump island, the car was gone. Gone. No note. No goodbye. Just tire tracks in the gravel and silence in her ears. Inside the station, the clerk was maybe 20, sunglasses on indoors, chewing gum, scrolling through TikTok. "You seen an SUV just leave here?" Evelyn asked, trying to steady her voice. "Silver one?" he replied. "Yeah, peeled out a minute ago. Kinda fast. Left you behind?" The words hit like a slap. "Yeah," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I guess they did." The kid shrugged, unfazed. "Happens more than you'd think out here." She tried calling from the station phone. No answer. She tried texting from the clerk's phone. Undeliverable. She asked for her wallet, remembered it was still in the glove compartment, under her spare medication. Her knees wobbled. She sank into the cracked leather booth near the window and stared at the faded Route 285 diner sign painted on the wall. An hour passed, then another, then a miracle. Her sister Janet picked up. "Janet, it's me," Evelyn croaked. "I'm at a gas station off 285. They left me." "What?" her sister gasped. "Who did?" "Eric and Rebecca, with the kids. They just drove off." "Oh my God. Evelyn, are you hurt?" "No, just shocked. I'm at Martin's Gas off exit 127, I think." "I'm coming, right now. Call the sheriff's department, file a report." Evelyn hung up and stared out the window, and then she saw it. On the wall-mounted TV above the fridge section, muted and flickering, a local news segment, a headline: "Elderly woman left at desert station, another case of family neglect." Different name, different face, but same story. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the last. That night back at Janet's home in Tucson, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Not because of the heat, not because of the humiliation, but because of what came next. She checked her bank app. Her Visa card had just been used for a spa resort in Glenwood Springs. Eric's name was on the room reservation, and the charge wasn't small. Her account balance? Down nearly $6,000 since last Thursday. A knot twisted in her chest. Not from money, but from clarity. They hadn't just abandoned her. They'd looted her. Janet poured her a glass of cold water. "You need to report this, Ev." "They're my family," Evelyn whispered. "They were," Janet said. "They aren't anymore. Not if they did this." "They used the kids," Evelyn added. "Made me think I was part of their world again, just so I'd drop my guard." "Are you going to let that be the last chapter?" Evelyn didn't respond, but the next morning she called Linda Chen. "I want to discuss full foreclosure options," she said. "Are you sure?" the attorney asked. "I was left like a piece of trash in the desert, Linda," Evelyn replied, voice steel. "They signed a contract, and I'm done pretending that blood excuses betrayal. If you've ever been used, discarded, or manipulated by someone you trusted, type 2. Because Evelyn may have been left behind, but she wasn't staying there. Not anymore." The voicemail transcribed itself at the top of Evelyn's screen. "Hi, this is Dr. Naomi Klein from Evergreen Wellness. I'm calling to follow up on the cognitive assessment you requested for Evelyn Hart. We've reviewed the submission from her son regarding signs of decline. Please call us back to confirm the next steps." Evelyn dropped the phone. Literally. It clattered to the floor beside her favorite armchair. Her son, the same one who abandoned her in the middle of nowhere, was now trying to declare her mentally unfit. She stared at the screen. Every breath came jagged. Her hands, once so steady from years of bookkeeping, curled into fists. This wasn't ignorance. It was premeditated. Earlier that week, Evelyn had finally taken Janet's advice and hired a private investigator. His name was Cole Ramirez, ex-military, quiet, direct, with a gaze that made people talk too much or not at all. Cole had listened to her story in silence, then nodded once. "I'll find out everything, but you should be prepared. It's rarely just about money." 3 days later, he returned, with files. "Your son has a pattern," Cole said, laying out images, receipts, and PDFs. 4 years ago, he borrowed $40K from Rebecca's parents under similar circumstances. House almost foreclosed, kid tuition, medical scare. Same story. Then, when they asked for repayment, he filed a mental health complaint against Rebecca's mother. It went nowhere legally, but it was enough to silence her. Evelyn stared at a screenshot, a note filed with CPS alleging elder neglect and mental instability. Her heart thudded. "He's done this before?" "Yes, and it gets worse." Cole flipped another file. "They're building a paper trail now, trying to paint you as unreliable. It started about 2 weeks before they left you at the station." She remembered. The tone in Eric's voice when she refused to forgive the loan. The tension during that road trip. The fact that her pill bottle disappeared mysteriously from her purse. That they claimed she was confused when she insisted she'd brought it. "He was staging the fall before he pushed me," Evelyn whispered. Cole didn't respond. He didn't have to. Later that day, she sat in her garden, pruning tomatoes that would never ripen in time. Her thoughts spun like bees around a hive. Was there ever love in his hugs? Was the bedtime story voice real? Had her entire motherhood been a transaction? Evelyn's chest tightened. Not from heartbreak. She had already bled that out in silence. This was war, and wars needed plans. She called Linda, her attorney. I want to move forward with the lien enforcement. File the demand for payment in full. If they default, seize the property. Evelyn, you know what that means, right? I know exactly what it means. It means I stop playing the part of the mother who waits. I start playing the woman who remembers she has rights. But then Eric called. Her phone rang at 9:27 p.m. Unusual. The voice on the other end was slick, sugar-laced with threat. Mom, he said, I hear you've been talking to lawyers. You filed a false claim with a clinic to take my rights. I was worried about you, he said. You've been forgetful. You showed up unannounced, accused us of theft in front of the kids. You abandoned me on a highway, Eric. Don't twist this. You're overreacting, he said coolly. You're still on the lien, aren't you? What's the big deal? You tried to remove it without telling me. Eric chuckled. You know what I think? I think you're angry that I'm doing well, that we're moving on. Evelyn's voice was steel. No, Eric, I'm angry that I raised a man who thinks manipulation is love. He paused. That caught him. Don't forget, he said finally, this could get messy for everyone. Family matters always look bad in court. I'll take the mess, she said. I've already lived through your silence. Your mess is just paperwork. The next morning, Evelyn received an envelope slid under her door. No name, no return address. Inside, printed screenshots of her private medical records. Notes from her last general checkup. Harmless things. Slight blood pressure fluctuation. Mild forgetfulness. Normal for her age. But someone had highlighted them in red. Sloppily, maliciously. Someone was trying to build a case that she was senile. To discredit her before court. To erase her voice entirely. She didn't cry. Instead, she scanned the pages, emailed them to Cole, and sat down to write something she never thought she'd need. A formal request to her bank for forensic review of her son's access to her credit accounts. Next, a notarized affidavit for elder financial abuse, backed by Linda's documentation and Cole's photos. Then, the final step, Evelyn scheduled a court date. The system they built to silence her had missed one critical thing. Evelyn had spent her entire career managing corporate budgets. She had audited departments for fraud, flagged inconsistencies, and trained interns in compliance. She knew paper trails, she knew loopholes, and she knew what it meant when someone thought a woman's silence was submission. They didn't know who they were up against. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who thought they owned your story, type 3, because Evelyn wasn't just a mother anymore. She was her own witness, her own advocate, and the storm they never saw coming. The courtroom fell into a hush as the bailiff called the next case. Evelyn Hart versus Eric and Rebecca Hart. Civil claim for fraudulent misrepresentation and elder financial abuse. Evelyn walked toward the plaintiff's table, her heels clicking against the polished floor like the slow ticking of a bomb. Her silver gray hair was pulled into a clean chignon, her tailored navy suit crisp and precise. She carried no cane, no visible tremble, only fire. Across the aisle, Eric adjusted his tie with clammy fingers. Rebecca avoided Evelyn's gaze completely, chewing her lip and whispering to their attorney. The same attorney who'd previously filed paperwork claiming Evelyn suffered from paranoia, cognitive decline, and instability. But the woman walking into court today looked like someone about to buy a company, not lose one, and she had brought receipts. It had all started with the foreclosure motion. Evelyn's attorney, Linda, had filed it after Eric failed to respond to 3 formal payment demands. Instead of replying, he'd submitted a counterclaim trying to declare her incompetent. But Evelyn, thanks to Cole Ramirez's help, had already gathered her own legal storm. Bank withdrawals traced to spa resorts. Video footage of Evelyn being left at the gas station, time-stamped and location verified. Phone recordings legally obtained of Eric threatening her reputation. And now, a damning email, one that Rebecca accidentally CC'd to the wrong person, an event planner. Subject: she still holds the lien. How do we get her declared unstable fast? Evelyn had it framed. The judge was a middle-aged woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper questions. Ms. Hart, are you alleging your son and daughter-in-law purposefully manipulated your finances and attempted to discredit your mental capacity to avoid repayment of a legal loan? Yes, Your Honor, Evelyn replied without a blink. And I'm here not just for justice, but for clarity, because silence lets people rewrite your name, and I'm taking mine back. During cross-examination, Eric's lawyer attempted a last-ditch maneuver. Ms. Hart, is it true that you've experienced memory lapses? Isn't it possible that you misremembered the terms of this alleged loan? Evelyn leaned forward. You're holding the signed lien agreement in your hand, sir. I remember every signature I've ever asked for. I also remember every time I was made to feel like I was just old enough to dismiss. Linda stood and slid a new document across the table. Your Honor, we are submitting a sworn affidavit from Dr. Naomi Klein, the same doctor who allegedly evaluated Ms. Hart. In this statement, Dr. Klein confirms she was never permitted to meet the patient in person and was given selective medical data and misleading third-party statements by the defendants. The judge raised her brows. So you're saying this assessment was fabricated? Manipulated, at the very least. Constructed to support a false narrative. Evelyn added quietly, just like the family they pretended we still were. Outside the courtroom, a swarm of local journalists waited. Word had spread, an elderly woman taking her own son to court for elder abuse and fraud. Someone shoved a mic in Evelyn's face. Mrs. Hart, how does it feel going after your own blood? She didn't flinch. I raised a boy who once cried because he thought his turtle was sick. That boy is gone. What's left is a man who tried to leave me on a highway and strip me of dignity. And I'll say this plainly. No one leaves me on a highway twice. Inside, the judge wasn't done. Ms. Hart, do you have any last statement before I deliberate? Evelyn stood, calm, heavy, like a storm before landfall. Yes, I spent years being a supportive mother, grandmother, and widow. I asked for nothing but respect. I gave help when it was needed. But when help became a leash and kindness became currency, they tried to erase me. She pointed to the screen where the evidence had just been presented. This isn't about a house. It's about recognizing when love turns into leverage and having the strength to say, no more. The judge nodded, then recessed. While they waited for a verdict, Eric leaned toward Rebecca, whispering in frustration. I told you not to CC that email, Rebecca hissed back. You're the one who said she wouldn't fight back. Guess what? You were wrong. 30 minutes later, the court reconvened. In the matter of Evelyn Hart versus Eric and Rebecca Hart, the judge began, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Evelyn didn't blink. The lien is enforced. The property shall be foreclosed within 30 days unless full repayment is made. Additionally, due to the defendant's documented manipulation attempts and unethical behavior, punitive damages in the amount of $50,000 will be awarded to Ms. Hart. The courtroom gasped. Eric turned white. The judge looked directly at him. Mr. Hart, Ms. Hart may be your mother, but in this courtroom, she's your creditor and your accuser, and she has prevailed. Outside, Janet was waiting with open arms. Evelyn walked out, not just as a mother, but as a woman who reclaimed her narrative, one paper, one courtroom, one truth at a time. But just as they stepped toward the car, Evelyn's phone buzzed again. A text. No name, just a burner number. The message. This isn't over. We're still family, and family always comes back. Evelyn stared at it, then deleted it, without a word. If you've ever had to reclaim your voice after someone tried to erase you, type 4. Because Evelyn didn't win just a case. She rewrote the ending they tried to steal.